Stay right where you are.
Extra chatter for your binge. This is a podcast exclusive episode of Chatterbinge.
This is Chatterbinge.
One of the things which makes what we do here special and different is that we share parts of ourselves that other hosts simply do not. We live in the moment, and we realize that the world can hear us. It's not just the two of us here with one another. And if what we talk about helps you or gives you a different perspective or understanding about something, well, it makes what we do have a purpose. Caryn has wanted to share something that can be used to create awareness. Thus, Caryn, I turn it over to you.
First of all, I'm really grateful to have this platform to use in this way. And I just want to say thank you to Ed Kalegi, because this is powerful for me. I am a brain aneurysm survivor. I survived a ruptured brain aneurysm and subsequently, a few years later, had another brain aneurysm that had to be repaired that thankfully did not rupture. This is something that I had never known anything about, didn't know what a brain aneurysm was, didn't know anything in terms of statistics. All I knew was that I was in the Bahamas with my sister, had what they call a thunderclap headache, which is probably the worst headache you will ever have in your life. It literally felt like a firecracker went off in my brain. I started to get terribly nauseous and ended up curled up in a ball for a few hours trying to get through it, never once thinking, weirdly, that my life was in danger, but knowing that something very seriously was wrong. I was with my sister, and thankfully she was keeping an eye on me, but at some point I felt well enough to Google my symptoms, and what it said was, if you have, and they listed my exact symptoms, get to a hospital as quickly as possible. Still, I did not think that my life was in severe danger. I thought something might be wrong, and then I hemmed and hawed because, as in many cases with people, you think, I'm fine. I don't want to go. And again, we were in the Bahamas. We were not in the United States. We got into a taxi. I walked through this majorly large hotel, again, with a ruptured brain aneurysm. And I'm going to go into what that is in 1 second. Walked through the lobby of the hotel, got into a taxi, went to what was considered the best hospital on the island of Nassau. The minute I walked in, they took me right into some imaging and right then and there said, you have a serious problem. I was airlifted within 10 hours to Miami because they were unable to treat it properly there. And thankfully, my life was saved. But here's what I want to say about a brain aneurysm. They go very undetected. Most people, many people, I should not say most, but if you've not been personally affected by brain aneurysms, many people don't know the difference between an aneurysm and a stroke. I certainly didn't. And what causes them. There's no early detection in place in our country, anywhere for that matter in the world. An aneurysm is a bubble that forms on an artery in the brain. And it's the actual wall of the artery that thins out. And as it thins out, much like a balloon, and as it fills up with blood, as the blood is rushing through that artery, at some point, in many instances, it ruptures. And then you have a brain bleed. It's similar to a stroke in terms of repercussions. It's a different dynamic, though. So a stroke is more of a clot. And as far as aneurysms, again, I had to become well-versed in so many aspects of them, but I stress that I knew nothing about them. And even while I was going through treatment, I did not realize how serious a condition this was and how low the survival rate was. Statistically, 1 in 50 people in the United States have an unruptured brain aneurysm. And statistically, only around 50% of those people survive. So 50% of the people that experience a ruptured brain aneurysm die within 3 months of their rupture. And of those that do survive, most experience permanent brain damage and neurological deficits. The brain, I've come to learn, though, is amazing because in my case, I did survive a ruptured brain aneurysm, and there is no rhyme or reason necessarily other than the fact that when it ruptured, I clotted quickly and was able to get through it. If not, I would not be sitting here with you. And as far as the repercussions of it and the deficits, I have shared this with you, Ed, but certainly not with our listeners. I continue to struggle. My brain aneurysm ruptured in the part of my brain that is responsible for communications. I communicate for a living as an actor. You've invited me to communicate with you, and I very often struggle to find words. I very often try to compensate for things that my brain takes a little bit longer than the average brain to process. So on the outside, brain aneurysm survivors very often look completely, quote, normal and are high functioning, of course. In many instances, they're not, sadly. But in my case, it's hard to sort of reconcile what I appear to be, and I appear to be high functioning, with what's going on internally at times. I literally have moments where I think, oh my God, I can't think of the word. And I'm not talking about, as we age, I understand that that's a normal process. But because I had a line in the sand, I had a day where I didn't have an aneurysm and then I had a post-aneurysm day, I was able to really experience it in a more powerful way of the changes that were going on in my head. And what I don't want this segment to be is a whole lecture on brain aneurysms, and I know you're sitting there listening so beautifully. I could go in so many directions, but the one thing I want to stress is that there is no early detection for brain aneurysms. And if you are out there listening and you have a history of brain aneurysms in your family, please go get screened. There is no screening in place as we do with other testing for diseases, testing for heart disease, cholesterol, all of that. We don't test for brain aneurysms. There really isn't a test other than imaging. In my case, when I asked over and over, why did this happen? Some of the reasons were it's congenital. It's just in your family. And somewhere along the line in my family, there was potentially a history for brain aneurysms. Head injury. I fractured my skull when I was quite young. And could that have potentially damaged some of the arteries within my brain? Smoking cigarettes. Oh my goodness. Yep, I was one of those people. My generation, we all started smoking in high school, and I certainly smoked throughout the years. I stopped, years ago, but that weakens the arteries and the lining of the arteries. Statistically, women are more subject to brain aneurysms than men, usually women over 50. There are certain ethnic groups that are more prone to having aneurysms. High blood pressure, that's a big one as well. So I think I have two messages. Then I'm going to stop talking, or at least for a second, and you're smiling. I know this is such a passionate subject for me. So I have two parts of me that process the fact that I'm a survivor. One, I don't identify with at all. It was sort of, even when I had it, I was in the ICU for 3 weeks. I got out. I hit the ground running. I had started a school. I really was either in denial or I don't know what the or would be, but I just did not let myself. I could have crawled into bed and never gotten out, I think. But that's not where I went with it. For some reason, I was driven, and I was not going to let this affect me. But the other part of it is I've gotten older and sort of owned it more. And this is a more powerful part of any of us who have survived something and have overcome something. The acceptance of the deficits, the acceptance of how that affected our lives. It's come for me much later, and it's really been more of a recent dynamic that I realize, wow, I am so lucky to be alive. And I am so lucky to be able to have a conversation with you, no matter how much you have to edit out all of my stumblings. And you make me sound so eloquent and articulate, and I thank you for that. And in general, I am. But when I stumble hard, and it scares me. And I'm going through my life with that on a very daily basis. Do I have it together enough? Am I making sense? That's a constant question I ask myself. So to all of our listeners that are struggling with repercussions of medical things that they have gone through. I feel a sisterhood, a brotherhood, a camaraderie. I'm an ally. I get it. And I am really on some level proud of myself to be doing this show in particular at Kalegi, because I'm going to try really hard not to cry, because what you ask of me is the very weakness that I have. And so you asking me to talk with you, is quite a gift. And I appreciate it. And I think that's really, the biggest thing that I wanted to say. And thank you for letting me talk for the last 10 minutes straight. Oh, it's a thing.
You got me going.
No, don't cry. No. Crying is... I'd love to normalize crying in our universe. That's a whole other thing. But I think... Should I stop talking?
No, keep going. No, keep going. No, I need you to keep going right now. Keep going. So,
Kalegi is emotional. Thank you. That's really deep. I think the tendency when you're in any way in the public eye, the tendency is to romanticize and think that their life is so incredible and they're not struggling and they're not human and they're not, they're not every man, in quotes, that they're the social media of it all, all the editing and the presentational part of that. It's very important to me to say, oh my gosh, nothing could be further than the truth for that. And that I personally experienced surviving something very, very dangerous. And I am forever grateful that I did survive. But we're all, again, I'm not preaching here, but I know that everybody out there is surviving something. Medical, emotional, human stuff. And I think it would help us all if we could admit this and just be that vulnerable and human and say, wow, yeah, I have my presentational side, but I also have something I'm overcoming on a daily basis. And I think that would help us all. I think. Okay.
Wow. Stop. That was a full working day.
Sorry.
No. And I got to say this. You are so ridiculously articulate now. You don't talk with your brain. You talk with your heart and you talk with your soul. And your brain simply allows the words to come out of your mouth. And that has not been affected in any way, shape, or form. Most interesting in what you said was you simply just defined what the human spirit is. You had something come your way which was and could have been even more catastrophic. But look how you bounced back. 2 weeks ago, you were shooting a film in Alabama. You had to learn lines. You had to deliver those lines with the emotion, with what you needed to do to be able to meet the requirements of the production, for you to be able to fulfill your character and work off your other actors. That has not been affected. Look at what you do here. Look at the difference that we're beginning to make here in these conversations that we have. And there were so many questions I have, and I don't care how long this segment's going to go. It's going to go as long as we want because it's our show, and that's why we have the extended segment. When you had this thunderclap headache, how long did that firework going off in your head, how long did that initial jolt last? And I don't want to get too personal here, but I think we're teaching here. This platform is an amazing school for us. So I'm going to ask some questions. How long was this thunderclap? Tell me about that.
It was fast. It felt, I remember I was going down to the beach. I remember that I did sit-ups and push-ups because, I'm a woman and I am wearing a two-piece bathing suit, and I just looked at myself and thought, this is a good time to do some exercise before I go down to the beach. Very often aneurysms rupture. The wall is weakening along the way, but very often, if we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of it, aneurysms occur if you're, forgive me, constipated and you're pushing to have a bowel movement, sex, orgasm, if you're going to have an orgasm, that action, what the body does during that. strenuous activity. It's the bearing down quite often that facilitates the actual rupture. This is not to instill fear in everybody out there. Have sex, go to the bathroom. But had I not, I often think, had I not been exercising, had I been on an airplane lifting a suitcase above into the overhead compartment.
Which you can't do.
ruptured.
We've already established that. You're too tiny.
Well, yes, that's true. But I also, at this point, because I have repaired aneurysms in my brain, I have to be careful of lifting heavy things. I cannot weirdly go on any roller coasters, no G-force kind of
Wow.
powerful activity, because my aneurysms are repaired with I'm thinking, am I even answering your question? And
You are.
I don't think I have.
No, this is more interesting than anything I could ask. Go ahead.
Well, this is fascinating to me. There's a few different ways to repair a ruptured bubble on the artery, the aneurysm. Mine are repaired by a process called coiling. coiling, unless just in case, coiling, where they literally stuff platinum coil wires into that little bubble, building a dam, so that as the blood rushes through in the artery, it bypasses the aneurysm, and ultimately that aneurysm, that bubble, will shrink down and meld into the actual artery. I have this other aneurysm that did not rupture, thankfully, where I have the same coiling procedure, and they put a stent in to hold it in place. It was a different shaped aneurysm. So the coiling was not able to stay in there on its own as it did in the first one. And they also can go in and do a craniotomy or go in through your skull and clip the actual aneurysm. So I was very lucky, to be honest. They did not have to break into my skull. And we'll end that thought for a second. But as far as that thunderclap headache, what it felt like, I felt something snap in my head. And it was, I had obviously never experienced anything like it, and I hope never to again. It was so weird. It was so, I can't describe the feeling, but it was strong and it was powerful. And it was like, again, a firecracker, a bang. I think, heard something. I think I might be imagining that, but my recollection is that I heard something. And very quickly, I thought, ooh, this isn't good. Very quickly, I got very nauseous, which is one of the symptoms as well. So there's a lot going on there. You're throwing up, you're dizzy, many people black out. I was very, very lucky that I did not. My sister was next door. I had the wherewithal, which I'm fascinated by, and this really helped me more than I can ever say. I had just read something where if, God forbid, you think you're having a heart attack, unlock your door. Call 911, obviously, or call who you have to.
Yeah.
I unlocked my door to my hotel room, and then I lay down. Then I called my sister. But had I not done that, I don't know what would have happened, to be honest. I mean, I guess ultimately someone would have gotten in. I was in a hotel. But I think the message out there, and it was a powerful one for me, is if you have any symptoms at all with anything going wrong in your body and you're home alone, as you're trying to get help, please unlock your door. That was very helpful to me.
Yeah.
But that headache, I had the headache for the entire 4 or 5 hours that I was curled up in a ball on my bed. My sister had given me a tramadol, which is a painkiller, because she thought I was having a migraine. Another lesson learned: do not listen to your lovely sister. I love her more than life itself. And also, oddly, the hotel nurse came up and said to me, "Oh, you're having a migraine." Never once considered that I should go to the hospital. So it wasn't until I got on with Dr. Google and started putting in my symptoms into the internet that said everywhere, get to the hospital if you have these symptoms. That's what motivated me to go. I don't know if I had been left to my own devices, whether I necessarily would have gone.
Yeah.
So
thank God you did that, because that's the standard response. Oh, you're having a migraine. Oh, close your eyes, turn the lights off. You'll be fine. You're just light sensitive. All of these default non-doctor responses. And when we're dealing with the brain, you don't mess around. And I keep thinking back to when you had a fractured skull. How old were you when you fractured your skull?
gosh. I was kindergarten.
I'm learning so much here.
Oh my gosh, so much more than you want to. I was in kindergarten. I remember it vividly. I was leaning over the banister. My brother was beneath me watching our black and white television. My mom and stepfather were in 2 chairs in the living room. It was a very modest little home on Long Island. And I do remember my mom saying, "Do not lean over the banister." And as she said that, I literally took a dive over the banister.
Oof.
It was a banister that was sort of self-standing, like there was a space underneath it. It was, not well, I guess that's most banisters. But I literally took a dive, and my brother broke my fall, thank God. Had he not, I would have landed on my skull and probably not been here either. But my brother broke my fall, and they rushed me to the hospital, and I had a fracture from one ear to the next.
Oh.
And there was nothing to be done about that. It just heals on its own.
Yeah.
I always had this weird feeling in my life about my head. I do not know why. But throughout my entire life, I have felt there's some weird thing that goes on with my head. Like, I don't know, fractured skull, brain aneurysm, banging my head, big giant speakers falling on my head. For some reason, I've been prone to that. I don't know what it means. Not sure what I believe about that spiritually, but nonetheless, there you have it. So, yeah, who knows? They do not know, decidedly why people get brain aneurysms. They have some suspicions. Certainly high blood pressure is not helpful.
No.
Smoking, again, weakens arteries, veins, everything, destroys the body, I suppose, on every level. But, yeah, it's weird when I think about it, to be honest.
If you had never told me that you had endured this, I'd never know, because it doesn't show itself on the outside. It doesn't. Even when I do edit the stuff that we do, it doesn't show. And it shows how resilient you are in terms of articulation, in terms of your thought process, in terms of everything that you do, everything that you are, the emotional side of you, the intelligent side of you, the performance side of you. But you have this wonderful perspective now that makes me wonder this. How much more appreciative are you of life after something like this happens?
Yeah. I have 2 answers to that. One, I didn't necessarily own it. I didn't really allow myself. I was in survival mode when I look back. Emotional survival mode. I'm not talking about physical. And when I said earlier, I am now just coming to terms with a lot of it in the last few years, identifying and putting together me with that. And I know how incredibly lucky I am. I can tell you that 60% of people that survive brain aneurysm, so we've said 1 in 2 die, and of the 1 that survives, 60%, these are all statistics, have very perceptible damage, have to learn to walk again, talk again, eat, function. I am so bloody lucky. So now I have a huge appreciation. I wish I could tell you, though, that after having survived that, I had this complete epiphany about life, and I am going to treasure every moment, and I'm not going to sweat the small stuff, and I'm going to, just embrace this beautiful life that I have. I can't say that I did. I really do think that I was in a bit of denial. But more and more I appreciate it, and certainly as I get older, and now you deal with the aging process, and I realized I have statistically lived way longer potentially than I should have. I was 56 years old when this happened. So maybe a little bit older. Might not have that math right. But 2014 is when I had it. So no, I wasn't. It's 2025. So, okay, we got that. But
58.
Nonetheless.
You were 50. Uh-oh, I'm 58.
Uh-oh, you're not going to have this. God forbid. Not going to happen.
I'm only trying to be a little funny here. I'm
I
sorry.
know you are. I know. It's affected me more in the recent past than it did originally, and I'm not sure I have an explanation for that. I did want to say one thing, though.
Yeah.
I've said a lot of things. I've absolutely overtaken this segment. Ed Kalegi, thank you for letting me do it. What the brain does to compensate, this I'm fascinated by. So when you have a bleed in your brain, that part of your brain dies. It doesn't come back. The rest of your brain compensates. But because of that, those who have a brain injury and have survived have to work much harder to do everything in their life. So I'm owning this, have something called neurofatigue, where you get burned out, where you get more tired than most. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that in life. We could go back to women going through menopause and hormones and all that stuff. But on top of it, the brain overcompensating, the brain making up for the part of the brain that is no longer functioning, that fascinates me. What a miracle the body is. You know, how it knows to do that is just amazing to me. But I do get tired. I do have to work harder. And I'm aware of that on some level. And that's unfortunate because I never, pre-aneurysm, had that. Having said that, again, small price to pay for still walking on the planet and being able to live. So, yeah. Oof.
Wow.
I've never talked this much about brain aneurysms, and I am very, very grateful for you for letting me ramble on about something that's really powerful and important to me.
It's your show, too. You could talk about whatever you want. And you had mentioned this a long time ago, and it was time to have this conversation. So I'm really glad that you did. And we're going to explore more because when we began the segment, before we went on the air, so to speak, you mentioned to me that September is a very special month for awareness when it comes to aneurysm. So I think what we'll do is maybe we'll fill in some of the blanks by reaching out and getting a medical professional to talk more about this and to create even more awareness, because this is a conversation which will live with this show forever because it's that important, and a lot of people will hear this, and people that never heard of aneurysm will now know about it and at least be aware. And you know what? There's going to be somebody in the Bahamas, there's going to be somebody in Las Vegas, there's going to be somebody in Peru, who knows, that will hear this next week, next month, next year, whenever, but then they'll have a thunderclap headache. And rather than have someone tell them, oh, it's a migraine, don't worry about it, they'll get to a hospital and they'll save their life because of this. So I think that's awesome. And for those listening, we kidded around before about how I edit out uhs and, once in a while. Nothing from this segment was edited. Nothing. You are listening to this from when we started it, from when we will eventually end it. And you just won't hear the 3, 2, 1, but everything else is as Karen is. None of this was edited in any way. So that's all I can say. And then one other thing. When we got a little emotional before, I had nothing to grab. I ended up using a hardened paper towel from my lunch 2 hours ago, and I rubbed my eyes with that. So now I'm all scraped up. So I just want to say, I know it's not a brain aneurysm. It's not even comparable, but thanks for that. So now I'm all scraped up. So I got to keep Kleenex in here, damn it.
That's true empathy at Kalegi. You want to hurt yourself in response to me having survived brain aneurysms? No. Listen, I am very, very grateful for your support, and I appreciate your sensitivity to something that's really meaningful to me. And I appreciate if our listeners have made it through this segment, please know that it means the world to me that you've listened. It really does.
Very well said, kiddo. Well, it's your segment, so you might as well wrap it up.
All righty then. So, I am Caryn Richman.
And I'm Ed Kalegi. And this is Chatterbinge.
This is Chatterbinge
with Ed Kalegi and Caryn Richman.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can always catch our best guest conversations and segments right here on the YouTube home of Chatterbinge.